Good morning again. This is Hadley from Tryon Palace. We're giving you a little extra live this morning because we figured it was such a lovely day. We wanted to come show you a little bit around our wilderness garden, which some of you may not be as familiar with. So we're going to walk through, look at a few things that are blooming, and hopefully just give you some calm morning inspiration. So one of the plants, the wilderness is a really diverse group of plants. And so one of my favorite plants is actually this one. This is Virginianica. You can tell it's got these really kind of soft blooms on it. It's a really, really great plant. Grows very, very easily here in the eastern side. You can tell this is the perfect morning for it because it's kind of doing that gentle waving in the breeze thing. But this is a really, really great plant for pollinators, especially bees. So we have a few of these across our properties. They grow in low-lying areas as well, so if you've got kind of semi-wet spots, these can be a great one for that. We're going to sneak around through the garden here. If you haven't discovered the wilderness garden before, for those of you who visit, especially in the summer or kind of hot days in the fall, it's a perfect garden to spend your afternoon. So as you can see, it's very shady. You can also see a lot of the trees that we talked about earlier in our talk. So we've got a wide range from some of our natives, like this eastern redbud here with heart-shaped leaves, and then a holly down the way. But we've also got some introductions, so things like crepe myrtles. So we don't necessarily make the wilderness a specific type of plant or plant family. We're not doing natives only out here. We just kind of have a variance of plants so that they can all get a little bit of kind of test of what some of the things are out here. I will say we're going to sneak through the garden path, so I promise it's okay with me. A couple of things that some of you may not have really kind of seen on your walks through the wilderness. This is Calycanthus Florida. This is sweet shrub or sweet Betsy. So it actually has these kind of little unique flowers. They've started blooming about a month ago and have gotten a little bit of damage you can see on the edges from some of that kind of frostier weather we've had, but a really, really great plant. And then if you look behind this particular small one, this is kind of the larger size they get to. So they actually can kind of be clumping in spreaders. Which is a nice kind of background plant. They will go deciduous in the winter, so I wouldn't put these at the front of your border because otherwise you're just going to have sticks for a season. But a really great plant. They can actually attract a fair amount of wildlife because they will produce some fruit at the end of the season, and they're just kind of a good plant for a backdrop border that also blooms while being a really kind of small to medium-sized shrub. One of my favorite things out here, we actually discovered last week. So this seemingly kind of little tree is actually an Alyssum Henryi. So related to some of the Alyssums that you may have seen in our other gardens that have very large red flowers, but this is the actual first time we've ever seen it bloom. So you can tell it's got these kind of succulent style little pink flowers, a really unique thing that we've got out here, to the point that the gardeners and I actually were talking last week trying to figure out what it was because we had never noticed it because it has never bloomed in any of our time here. I've been here 7 years. Going on 8, and I have never seen it bloom. So a cool little plant. You can tell it's really kind of covered in blooms across the whole of the plant, and then this does stay evergreen through most of the winter as well.
Miss Hadley, we got a comment in here from Laura. He says, hope you can sell sweet Betsy at next plant sale. Very fragrant.
It is. We're really hoping to get it. That's one of those that's kind of interesting because it's very much an heirloom plant, very much a southern native, but has kind of become a little hard to find in the trade. you may be joining us for the first time, one of the things that you'll quickly find in our gardens, our joke for locating yourself is, if you get lost, just keep walking in circles. So most of our paths do connect you back up with everything else. You'll see we've got a lot of black-eyed Susan coming up, or echinacea, purple coneflower. So this area will be completely blooming in probably another month. So we see those Alyssium henryi over there. But to give you an idea, this is the much more standard version. This is an Alyssium floridanum, or a small anise tree. These leaves actually do smell like licorice, but this is the much larger flower that these tend to have compared to those itty bitty ones off the henryi. So a really distinct difference. So something we're really excited to have, because we knew we had these Alyssiums and we had never seen the other one bloom. Get to see as we come across the back area of the palace that we are still doing very much some work. We're really fortunate that our gardeners have been on site, because gardening never stops, and so we are making a point to social distance from each other, but with 16 acres that's pretty easy to do. So we're continuing to work on pulling out some of our kind of problem vines and things like that so that we can be ready to go. And then to give you an idea, we talked about it in a little in our presentation, but this is that live oak. There's another behind us on the other side, but these are 60 years old. So really not that large compared to what a lot of people think. You can also see that in 60 years, they have already gotten taller than the palace. And so for us, that's kind of a little bit frightening, because these are very, very large trees, so close to the palace. So we make a point to spend a lot of time taking care of them, getting out dead limbs as needed. So there's one left on it. This tree above us, if you come under here, you can see just the tip of it. But this is actually a pawpaw. So there's one little bloom left. That kind of brown, gnarly looking thing is actually what pawpaw blooms look like. And pawpaws are actually the largest edible native fruit in North America. So we're really lucky we have kind of a pawpaw grove. They do produce a fair amount of blooms every year, not necessarily as much fruit, and that's potentially related to if they have enough pollinators, but a really, really great tree, whether or not it produces fruit. It's also a larval host for swallowtail, for some species of swallowtail butterflies. Another one of my favorite trees out here in the wilderness, this is a Buckeye. I know it's not Ohio, but yes, this actually grows very well here. So these just finished flowering a couple of weeks ago. They have kind of fuchsia colored flowers, but you can tell they're really nice tree shaped, very much vase shaped. They provide a lot of shade with really interesting kind of foliar texture. I'd say one of the big things you have to keep in mind with Buckeyes is that they do produce fruit. It is not edible, but if you have squirrels, sometimes they will plant you new Buckeyes. So something to kind of keep in mind. If you're gonna have a Buckeye tree, don't put it in your front lawn unless you want to commit to mowing little seedlings. So you'll see we have a lot of little seedlings that start to come up underneath this area. Probably the last daffodil in New Bern. It's very late for daffodils for us. It's now the middle of May, so very out of season. but we've got a few that are kind of past their normal timing and have held on longer than usual. We're finding this year, as most of us kind of saw coming on as an early trend, that a lot of our plants are about a month ahead. So we had a lot of things like daffodils that bloomed 3-4 weeks earlier than they should have. But it's just kind of part and parcel to Mother Nature sometimes. So we've got the last few little ones, some narcissus and daffodils who are coming up in the wilderness garden. Underneath them, you'll see these kind of tall, stringy things. These are actually swamp sunflowers. So for those of you who may be deeply in love with our swamp sunflowers blooming in October, this is what they look like at the start. They are very much a prolific grower, and so we actually mow them about 3 times a year to keep them from overtaking our lives. A great example of one of the magnolias. So this is one of the original magnolias to the replanting of the palace. A big thing to note with magnolias is that while they do produce a lot of leaf drop, part of that is because people tend to plant them on pathways and then you have to limb them up. So if you don't want to deal with as much leaf and kind of seed debris from magnolias, make a point to kind of keep them limbed down as much as you can, and they'll contain a lot more of their own debris underneath. We're getting the first couple of blooms on the magnolias, but it's still a little bit early for that. So you can see behind us on this side, this is the pleached alley. We're right before shearing it, but this is that Yopon holly we talked about. A really great native, really durable. It does vary to a little bit of a degree, but a good kind of evergreen plant to use. Very, very pliable, so that makes it really a good resource. What I mean by pliable is that I can bend the branch pretty significantly without doing any damage or breaking it off. So that's one thing if you're gonna grow kind of shrubs or things like this that you need to be able to train, you wanna look for something that's not gonna snap in half the first time you touch it. And then a couple of our favorites that we've added recently to the garden. So this is Katinas, or smoke tree. It's a really, really beautiful variety that we got in last year. Smoke bush is another name for this. And so when it flowers, it actually gets these very puff-like blooms, and the entire thing will look like it's kind of covered in this fuzzy smoke appearance. They do get about 10 to 15 feet tall, and so we are looking forward. We just planted this one about 2 months ago, so we're really looking forward to it filling up this space in the coming year. So we've talked about our southern magnolias, and you can actually see the bloom starting on one of those right there. But one of the big traits that people tend to associate with southern magnolias is that they have those green front of the leaves, the brown back of the leaves. But a big thing that we really are big fans of, and you can actually see that there are some flower buds starting on this one right here in the middle. This is a swamp bay magnolia. So this is one of our native magnolias. The one way to tell if you've got a swamp bay magnolia, no matter what species you buy, swamp bay magnolias will always have this kind of silver white back to the leaves. If they do not have a silver or a white back to the leaves, it is not a swamp bay magnolia. Swamp bay magnolias stay a lot smaller, and because of the name, they do grow in wetter areas than some of our southern magnolias will. But it's important to note, if you buy a swamp, what's labeled as a swamp bay magnolia that has a green back to the leaf, you are potentially getting a southern magnolia that will get very, very large. So really make sure you're finding that white back leaf. It's pretty distinct. You don't see it on any of the others. who may not have been in our wilderness garden area recently, this has been a big planting section for us from kind of the back of the Pleat Chalet on. So we've got a lot of new things that we've added in. We have a vitex that's one of my favorite pollinator trees personally, and then one of my very, very favorite hydrangeas. So this is an oak leaf hydrangea, so named because the leaves of it look like oak trees. It's a great, great variety, or great species of hydrangeas. They handle a lot of shade. They'll handle full sun. Their leaves turn dark red during the fall, and then they'll hold on to them for a fairly long time. So a lot of hydrangeas kind of hit that first frost and die out. That doesn't happen with oak leaves. And you can tell that they bloom kind of along the full span of this. So these are the very newest blooms, and they'll actually bloom all the way up and out. And we have some others that are blooming that we'll get to show you. So this is another of our oak leaf hydrangeas. You can tell they do get fairly large, but this is what I mean by each of those individual little blooms. So hydrangeas as a whole can be really important because if you look at it, each one of these little flowers is an individual flower. So for pollinators, you'll see some amount of honeybees on these, but also some of our smaller pollinators you may not think of as commonly. So some of the little itsy bitsy wasps, some of the ant varieties, and some of the other kind of beetle pollinators will actually use hydrangeas like this to kind of feast on. They're a really, really beautiful plant. They handle a whole lot of conditions. You can see we're actually starting to get direct sunlight on this one, and so they're just all-stars. They don't have a lot of issues if we have drought and kind of weathers like that, but one of my favorites. One of the big things that we find with hydrangeas in the eastern part of North Carolina is that they can sometimes, when we hit those really dry periods, kind of do the leaf flop, and they generally don't suffer long term from it, but it's definitely not the best look in your garden to deal with. So we really, really like oak leaf hydrangeas, and we have a lot throughout the property here. And you can actually see there's a honeybee starting to come onto the blooms over there. She's sneaking away from me. And one up here too. So you can see they're actually going out. This isn't going to be a particularly nectar heavy flower for them, but they will get a lot of pollen potentially off of this. And for bees, pollen is going to be what they're using to raise new baby bees. So even if it's not nectar, it's still really important to them.
Hey Hadley, we have a comment from Christine. Love gardens. This is hometown at its best.
Yes, yes. The wilderness garden is one of my favorites, and I think it's something that a lot of people, because it's on the far end of our property, don't tend to realize, but I think it's a really peaceful garden. There's sometimes, if I have gotten my quota of emails from the day, that you'll find me wandering out here looking for new things to have as plants.
And Annie says, I'm enjoying the walk in the TP gardens.
Well, thank you. So we talked earlier about the red buds. There are actually a lot of different species of red buds. So a lot of people may kind of know is that original red bud we saw as we came in, the green heart leaf. Red buds will almost always have heart-shaped leaves, but they come in a lot of different colors now. So this particular variety is forest pansy. It's one that's been out for a while. It blooms the same pink blooms that you'd suspect, but the leaves are always going to be this kind of dark green, purpley color, and it will still be kind of an upright form. So something to really consider with some of our native species is that you don't have to get the absolute native iteration. It doesn't have to be point blank the exact thing that you would find in the wild. There are a lot of cultivars now, or nativars, that have been bred that do even better in a garden landscape. And definitely red buds are one of those things that people have actually started a lot of breeding work with, because this tree is called forest pansy and will get probably 20 foot tall. But for gardens that are a little bit smaller, there are also a lot of weeping varieties of red buds now that stay more about my height and kind of weep, same blooms, same leaf color that you can get a lot of variation in, but a really graceful habitat. And people are starting, especially from a landscape breeding perspective, to be a lot more cognizant of that fact. So if you've written off a tree for your landscape in the last 10-ish years, check it back out again, because there are a lot of things that do really well. Now this one is my own personal fun. So the gardeners actually recommended this. We spend a lot of our time with researching and things like that, different styles of pruning, different styles of growing things like that. And so this actually came out of a Bryce Lane lecture on how to grow small things or big things in small gardens. So these are actually crepe myrtles, and if you look here at the very base, you can see the original stump. And then if we pan up across the way, you can actually see that the size that these crepe myrtles used to be at. So this technique is called coppicing, and it's a really great technique for things like hollies and crepe myrtles that may kind of outgrow their nice growing species or nice growing status. So these we actually cut to the ground last year in the fall, and they've already grown back up this much. So they're already about 6 foot. They were about 20, but this is a great way if you've got camellias or crepe myrtles that were planted in your yard that are oversized. Do all of us landscape professionals a favor, don't cut them off at 3 feet. That's crepe murder, not really. They will live through it, but it doesn't look very good. So if you're having issues with a crepe myrtle that's kind of overgrowing the spot it's in, try cutting it back, leaving about 4 inches from the ground, and you'll get a lot of sprout back growth. This is also going to be, for most crepe myrtles, they bloom on new wood. And so if you've also got an older crepe myrtle that's maybe not producing anymore, you can actually kind of push it to produce more blooms that you may have lost. They will still go back to that same really graceful tall crepe myrtle shape. This doesn't permanently change the way they grow, but it does give you some time if you've had one that's really eating your garden space and borderline on your list of things to take out. So we love crepe myrtles here. We have a lot of different species, a lot of different colors. The other thing I'll say is that if you're looking for a new crepe myrtle in your garden, try to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of different varieties in crepe myrtles as well. So what used to be the only varieties you could really get would be, 15 feet or 40 feet. Now we've even got little like 3x3s. So if your garden only has space by a 3x3 crepe myrtle, save yourself some time and pruning in the future and just buy the 3x3. Don't buy the 20x40. Little fun plant before we leave you for the day. This is actually a camellia. This is a Camellia sinensis. If you didn't know, this is actually the plant that tea comes from. We don't produce tea off of this because we need a bit colder climate, but you can actually grow them here in North Carolina. They do have flowers. You can see that there's little leftover pods kind of all over. So they're very small flowers, generally white. There are some new cultivars that have pink flowers, but afterwards you'll see that there are little seed pods like this. So to give you an idea, a normal camellia seed pod is going to be more like the size of my hand. So these are very small flowers, but a really unique shrub, and for us something we find a little bit fun, seeing is how obsessed they were with tea in the colonial time period. So a fun plant to kind of give people an idea that yes, that camellia that you may use to have very large winter blooms in your family or your family's lawn, or maybe passed down from your grandmother, they actually are kind of that same genus as a tea plant. So a lot of people don't realize that. You'll see that they definitely have kind of fallen out because this is very much a kind of typical look. They don't have as pretty a leaves as the Camellia sasanquas or Camellia japonicas that we have as the really heavy bloomers. But if you're interested in camellias and you want kind of that variety, and you just want the kind of street cred of saying that you have a tea plant in your own yard, you can grow them. They do tend to stay a lot smaller than some of the other camellias, and so this is actually one that they're using to breed off of for kind of hedge-sized flowering camellias. But if there aren't any other questions, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for a little bit longer this morning. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and stay tuned to our social media for more adventures like this.